Master the frameworks that transform routine discussions into opportunities for progress, alignment, and lasting impact. Think about the last high-stakes conversation you had: a client pitch, a salary negotiation, a strategy meeting where everyone had an opinion but no one had a plan. Did you actually move the needle, or did you just fill the silence with words? Most people treat communication as an improvised act. They hope that if they say enough smart things, they'll get what they want. Strategic influence isn't about hope. It's about engineering the outcome before you even open your mouth. This audiobook isn't just about speaking better. It's a blueprint for using psychology, tactical frameworks, and AI-powered preparation to turn every interaction into a business asset. We're going to dismantle the bad habits that make you sound unsure and replace them with the tactics that drive revenue, respect, and results. Chapter 1: The Economy of Words: Why Less is Leverage. We live in an attention economy, but right now, inflation is at an all-time high. Every day, your clients, your boss, and your stakeholders are bombarded with thousands of messages, emails, Slack notifications, text messages, and social media pings. Their attention is fragmented. It is a scarce resource. And yet, most professionals treat communication like they are paid by the word. They write 5 paragraphs when 2 sentences would do. They spend the first 10 minutes of a presentation setting the stage instead of getting to the point. They over-explain, over-justify, and overcomplicate. This is a strategic error. In a noise-filled market, brevity isn't just a stylistic choice. It is a signal of confidence. When you over-explain, you are subconsciously signaling insecurity. You are telling the room, "I am not sure if you believe me, so I'm going to keep talking until you do." The result is deadly. You lose the room before you even get to your value proposition. This chapter is about flipping that dynamic. We are going to discuss the economy of words. Just like financial economics, the law of supply and demand applies here. The more words you supply, the less value each word holds. If you want your words to carry weight, if you want to command the room, you must make them scarce. Communication creates results, but only if people actually hear what you are saying. Today, we are going to learn how to strip away the fluff. We are going to look at why the most valuable companies in the world are obsessed with writing less. And I am going to give you the exact frameworks to edit your own communication for maximum impact. Less talking, more traction. Let's get to work. The psychology of over-explaining. Why do we ramble? If we know that people have short attention spans, why do we send long emails? Why do we fill the silence in negotiations? It usually comes down to 2 psychological traps: the data trap and the imposter trap. The data trap is the belief that more information equals more value. This is especially common in technical fields, marketing, and engineering. You've done the work. You spent weeks on the research. You want to show your math. You feel that if you leave out a single detail, you aren't doing your job. But your client doesn't pay you for the process. They pay you for the insight. Imagine you hire a guide to get you up a mountain. You don't want them to explain the geological history of every rock you step on. You want them to point and say, "Step there, don't step there." When you dump data without curation, you aren't being thorough. You are being lazy. You are forcing the other person to do the work of finding the point. The imposter trap is even more dangerous. This happens when you feel you need to justify your existence. You over-explain your pricing because you're afraid it's too high. You add 3 extra slides to the deck because you're afraid the solution looks too simple. Here is the business truth. Senior leaders value time more than money.
If you can explain a complex problem in 30 seconds, you are viewed as an expert. If it takes you 30 minutes, you are viewed as a novice. Complexity is a sign of confusion. Simplicity is a sign of mastery. When you shorten your message, you aren't hiding information. You are curating it. You are respecting the recipient's time. And in business, respect is the foundation of influence. This is how you win clients. You become the person who makes their life easier, not the person who gives them more to read.
The Amazon case study, banning the PowerPoint. Let's look at a real-world example of how this plays out at the highest level. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, famously banned PowerPoint presentations in executive meetings. This wasn't just a quirk of a tech billionaire. It was a calculated move to force clarity. Bezos realized that bullet points on a slide are easy to fake. You can write "optimize synergy" on a slide and everyone nods. But what does that actually mean? PowerPoint allows for lazy thinking. It allows the presenter to hide behind buzzwords and charisma. So Amazon replaced slides with 6-page memos. Here is the rule. Before any meeting starts, there is silence. For the first 20 minutes, everyone sits in the room and reads the 6-page memo silently. Only then does the discussion begin. Why does this work? Because writing a memo requires a narrative structure. You cannot hide a gap in logic within a paragraph the way you can on a slide. It forces the writer to be incredibly precise. It forces them to understand their own argument so deeply that they can articulate it in plain English. The result? The meetings are shorter. The decisions are faster. The thinking is clearer. Now, you might not be able to ban PowerPoint in your company tomorrow, but you can adopt the memo mindset. Before you get on a call, before you build a deck, ask yourself, if I had to write this as a narrative without any visual aids, would it still make sense? If the answer is no, you aren't ready to present. The Amazon example teaches us that structure forces discipline. When you constrain your format, you elevate your content. This is the essence of the economy of words. It isn't just about using fewer words, it's about making sure the words you do use are doing heavy lifting. You guide the conversation by doing the hard work of simplification before you ever enter the room. Tactical frameworks, the audit, and the BLUF. How do we apply this? You aren't going to write a 6-page memo for every email. We need practical tools for everyday communication. Here are 2 frameworks you can use immediately. Framework 1, the 50% audit. This is a brutal editing technique for high-stakes emails or scripts. Draft your email, write it out exactly as it comes to your brain, then, before you hit send, look at the word count. Let's say it's 200 words. Your goal is to cut it to 100 words without losing the core meaning. Look for the throat-clearing sentences. These are phrases like, I'm just reaching out to see if, I wanted to circle back and check in on. Basically, what we are trying to do is delete them. They add 0 value. They are social filler. Here's a script comparison. The amateur draft. Hi Sarah, hope you're having a great week. I was just looking at the data from the last campaign and I noticed that while impressions are up, we aren't seeing the click-throughs we wanted. I think it might be because of the creative. I was wondering if you have some time on Tuesday or Wednesday for us to maybe jump on a quick call and brainstorm some new ideas. The professional edit. Hi Sarah, reviewing campaign data. Impressions are up, but clicks are flat. The creative needs a refresh. Are you free Tuesday at 2 p.m. to review 3 new concepts? The second version is half the length and twice the power. It states the fact, identifies the problem, and proposes a specific solution. Communication creates results. The first version asks for permission. The second version drives action. Framework 2, BLUF system, bottom, line, up, front. This is a military communication standard. In the military, you don't have time for a preamble. You put the bottom line up front.
In business, we tend to bury the lead. We tell the story of how we got to the conclusion and then reveal the conclusion at the end. That is backward. Start with the ask. Start with the result. Instead of, we looked at the software options and we compared pricing and we interviewed the teams and we think option A is best. Say, we recommend option A. Here is why. When you use BLUF system, you hook the listener instantly. They know exactly where you're going so they can relax and follow your logic. You are respecting their mental energy.
The AI Accelerator. A quick note on artificial intelligence. We are going to talk a lot about AI in this audiobook. But regarding brevity, AI is a double-edged sword. Tools like ChatGPT are incredible at generating text. They can write 1,000 words in seconds. But remember, AI makes you faster, not weaker. Do not fall into the trap of using AI to generate bulk. If you use AI to write an email, your job is to be the editor. Use AI to summarize. Use AI to condense. Prompt your AI with this. Rewrite this to be more concise, professional, and under 100 words. Remove all passive voice. Use the technology to sharpen your blade, not to make the pile of hay bigger. In a world where AI can generate infinite text, the human who can synthesize and curate becomes the most valuable person in the room. Your implementation plan. We've covered the psychology, the strategy, and the tactics. Now you need to practice. Here is your challenge for the next 24 hours. It's called the 3-sentence rule. For every internal email you send today, try to keep it to 3 sentences or less. The context, the so what, why does this matter, and the call to action. What do you need next? It will feel uncomfortable. You will feel like you are being too blunt. You aren't. You are being clear. Monitor the responses. You will notice that people reply faster. You will notice that there is less confusion. You will notice that you get what you asked for. This is how you win clients, not by overwhelming them, but by leading them. When you master the economy of words, you create a vacuum. You create space. But space is useless if you don't know how to fill it with the right information. You have stopped the noise. Now you need to learn how to truly understand the signal coming back at you. We are going to move from speaking to listening, but not passive listening, strategic listening. You mastered clarity, now you need insight.
Chapter 2. Diagnose before you prescribe. Imagine you walk into a doctor's office. You sit down, and before you can say a word, the doctor hands you a prescription for stronger glasses. You stare at him. "But doctor," you say, "my eyes are fine. My knee hurts." In the medical world, that is called malpractice. A doctor who prescribes medication without diagnosing the patient is dangerous. They lose their license. They get sued. But in the business world, we do this every single day, and we call it pitching. We walk into a meeting with a client, and before we know what is actually broken in their business, we start prescribing our solution. We open the slide deck, we list our features, we talk about our awards, our history, and our capabilities. We are prescribing glasses to a patient with a broken knee. This is why most sales pitches fail. This is why internal initiatives get rejected. It isn't because your solution is bad, it is because you are answering questions that the other person hasn't asked yet. Communication creates results, but only when it hits a target. If you are shooting in the dark, you are just making noise. In Chapter 1, we talked about removing the fluff. Now, we are going to talk about filling that silence with the right questions. This chapter is about shifting your identity. You are no longer a salesperson, a manager, or a marketer. You are a diagnostician. Your goal is not to sell. Your goal is to understand the gap between where they are and where they need to be. Only when you understand that gap do you earn the right to offer a solution. This is how you win clients. You stop trying to be interesting and you start being interested. The psychology of the feature dump. Why do we rush to the solution? It comes back to insecurity. When we are in a high-stakes conversation, silence feels dangerous. We feel pressure to prove our value immediately. So we default to what we know, our product, our team, or our skills. We think, if I just show them everything this software can do, they will see something they like. This is the feature dump. It is the enemy of influence. When you list features without context, you are forcing the client to do the mental work. You are asking them to connect the dots between your feature and their problem. Most of the time, they won't bother. They will just tune out.
Let's look at our real business example. There was a software consultant struggling to close deals for a high-end project management tool. His strategy was standard. He would get on a Zoom call, share his screen, and spend 45 minutes clicking through every tab, dashboard, and reporting feature. He was showing them everything, and his closing rate was abysmal. He decided to run an experiment. He stopped showing the product. For the first 20 minutes of the call, he kept the screen black. He didn't talk about the software. Instead, he asked about the client's biggest operational headache. He asked, "Walk me through what happens when a project misses a deadline. Who gets the blame? How much does it cost you?" He dug deep. He found that the real pain wasn't project tracking. The real pain was that the VP of operations was spending her weekends manually fixing spreadsheets and was terrified of burning out. Once he understood that, he didn't show 50 features. He showed one. He showed the automated reporting feature. He said, "This feature will give you your weekends back." His close rate doubled. Why? Because the client started selling themselves. Once they felt understood, once they felt the consultant had diagnosed the real injury, the prescription became obvious. You guide the conversation by uncovering the pain, not by masking it with a pitch. The discovery framework: situation, pain, impact. How do you execute this? You can't just ask, "What's your problem?" That's lazy. You need a structure. I call this the discovery framework. It moves through 3 distinct levels: situation, pain, impact. Level 1, the situation, the facts. These are the basics. You are establishing the baseline. Walk me through your current process. What tools are you currently using? How is the team structured right now? Most people stop here. They get the facts and jump to the pitch. That is a mistake. Facts don't drive decisions. Emotions drive decisions. You need to go deeper. Level 2, the pain, the friction. Now you look for the break. Where is the process slowing down? What part of this workflow frustrates the team the most? You mentioned you use tool X. What is the one thing you wish it did differently? Now you are finding the injury, but you still aren't ready to prescribe. A small injury isn't enough to justify a big purchase or a big change. You need to find the cost of that injury. Level 3, the impact, the cost. This is the money layer. This is where you win the deal. You need to help them quantify what that pain is costing them. If that process is slowing you down by 2 days every week, what does that mean for your quarterly targets? How is this frustration affecting employee retention? If this problem isn't solved in 6 months, what happens? Do you see the difference? Level 1 is data. Level 2 is frustration. Level 3 is business urgency. When you get a client to articulate the impact, you don't have to convince them to buy. They have just convinced themselves that staying the same is too expensive. Communication creates results when you make the problem so clear that the solution becomes the only logical next step. Implementation, the Columbo method. This works for management too. Let's say you are a leader and your team is missing deadlines. The prescription approach is to storm in and say, "We need to work harder. I'm instituting a daily stand-up meeting." You just prescribed a solution without a diagnosis. The team will resent it. The diagnostic approach looks like this. You sit down with the team lead. Situation: we missed the last 2 milestones.
pain. What exactly happened in the 48 hours before the deadline? Walk me through it. Diagnosis. You discover that the team isn't lazy, they're waiting on approval from the legal department, which takes 3 days. Impact. So the legal bottleneck is costing us a week per sprint. Now, as a leader, you don't need to yell at the team. You need to go talk to legal. You diagnosed the root cause. Here is a practical technique you can use today. It's called the Columbo method, named after the TV detective. Columbo was famous for asking just one more thing. He played the role of the curious observer, never the aggressor. In your next meeting, play dumb. Even if you think you know the answer, ask the question. Help me understand. I'm curious, why do you do it that way? Tell me more about that. Let silence do the heavy lifting. When they finish answering, wait 3 seconds. Usually, the real truth comes out in that second pause. This is how you win clients and respect, by proving that you care enough to understand the nuance of their world.
The AI advantage in diagnosis. Now, how does AI fit into this? You might think diagnosis is a purely human skill. It requires empathy, right? Yes, but AI makes you faster, not weaker. You can use AI to simulate the diagnosis before you even get on the call. Before a high-stakes meeting, paste the prospect's LinkedIn profile, their company's recent news, and their website copy into your AI tool. Then, use this prompt. Based on this company's recent growth and this person's role, what are the top 3 hidden operational pains they are likely facing right now? What questions should I ask to uncover them? The AI will give you a list of potential fractures. It might tell you, they just merged with a competitor, so they are likely struggling with cultural integration and redundant software. Now, when you walk into the meeting, you have a hypothesis. You aren't starting from zero. You can ask, I noticed the recent merger. How is the team handling the software migration? Suddenly, you look like a mind reader. You didn't just do research, you did diagnostic prep. Use AI to prepare your questions so your brain is free to listen to the answers. Your next step. Here is your closing thought for this chapter. The most persuasive person in the room isn't the one with the smoothest talk track. It is the one who understands the problem better than anyone else. When you can articulate a person's problem better than they can describe it themselves, they automatically credit you with the solution. So, your challenge. In your next conversation, ask 3 diagnostic questions before you make a single statement. What is the situation? Where does it hurt? What is it costing you? Once you have that information, you have the leverage. You have diagnosed the fracture. Now you are ready to set the bone. But knowing the problem is only half the battle. You have to propose the solution in a way that guarantees a yes. You can't just talk about what you will do. You have to talk about what they will get. You mastered the diagnosis? Now you need to sell the cure. Chapter 3. The AI advantage in preparation. The preparation gap. Most professionals prepare for high-stakes meetings the exact same way. They open the client's website, they read the About Us page, maybe they scroll through the CEO's LinkedIn profile to see where they went to college, and then they say, okay, I'm ready. That is not preparation. That is skimming. If you walk into a negotiation knowing only what is publicly available on a homepage, you are operating at a disadvantage. You are reacting to surface-level information. To influence someone, you need to understand how they think. You need to know their biases, their communication style, and their hidden pressures before you even shake hands. In the past, getting this level of intel required a team of analysts or weeks of research. Today, you have a research analyst in your pocket. It is called
artificial intelligence. But here is the problem. Most people use AI lazily. They use it to write generic emails or draft boring blog posts. That is the lowest value use of the technology. The leaders who win are using AI differently. They don't use it to generate text, they use it to process data. They use it to simulate objections. They use it to walk into rooms already 3 steps ahead. In this chapter, we are going to change how you view AI. It is not your copywriter, it is your strategist. AI makes you faster, not weaker. And today, we're going to use it to predict the future of your next conversation. The case study, reading the mind of a CEO. Let's look at a real-world example of what this looks like in practice. A marketing agency was trying to land a 6-figure contract with a major retail brand. They knew the pitch had to be perfect. The standard approach would be to look at the brand's sales numbers and pitch a strategy to increase revenue. But the agency decided to go deeper. They used AI to perform sentiment analysis. They took the transcripts of the CEO's last 5 podcast interviews and public speeches. They fed this text into an AI model and asked a specific question. What are the core values and fears of the CEO based on his language patterns? The AI came back with a surprising insight. It found that while the CEO talked about growth, his language heavily favored legacy, long-term brand building, and reputation. He actually reacted negatively to aggressive short-term ROI tactics in his interviews. This was a goldmine. The agency realized that if they pitched a quick-win sales strategy, the CEO would hate it. It would feel risky to him. So they completely rewrote their pitch. They stopped talking about immediate ROI and started talking about generational brand equity. They matched his exact communication style. The result? They closed the deal. The CEO told them, "You are the only agency that actually gets what we are trying to build." They didn't get lucky. They used data to find the alignment. Meanwhile, a startup founder used a similar tactic. She had 50 transcripts from customer interviews, hours of audio. She didn't have time to re-listen to all of them. She fed the transcripts into an AI and asked, "What is the one unmet need that every customer mentioned which my team missed?" In under an hour, the AI identified a pattern. Customers weren't complaining about the price. They were complaining about the onboarding speed. Her team had missed it completely. She fixed the onboarding and retention skyrocketed. This is how you win clients. You use technology to hear what others are missing. Tactical workflow, the objection simulator. How do you do this tomorrow? You don't need to be a data scientist. You just need the right prompts. One of the most powerful ways to use AI is as an objection simulator. We all have blind spots. We fall in love with our own ideas. We think our proposal is perfect. But the person across the table is looking for reasons to say no. Instead of waiting to be blindsided in the meeting, use AI to role-play the opposition. The strategy. Before a pitch, paste your proposal into your AI tool. Then use this prompt. You are the CFO of a mid-sized manufacturing company. You are skeptical of new spending, risk-averse, and focused on cost-cutting. I am going to pitch you this solution. I want you to brutally critique it. Give me the top 5 reasons you would say no to this. The AI will tear your idea apart. It will say things like, the implementation timeline is too vague, or you haven't proven the ROI quickly enough. This is painful, but it is valuable. Now you can rewrite your pitch to answer those objections before they are even raised. Communication creates results when you eliminate the friction before it happens.
By the time you walk into the real meeting, you have already had the argument. You have already won. You aren't improvising. You are executing a script that you have already stress tested. Tactical workflow, the stylistic mirror. Another powerful tool is stylistic mirroring. People trust people who sound like them. If you are speaking startup tech to a conservative banker, you will clash.
Use AI to decode their dialect. Paste a sample of your prospect's writing, an email, a LinkedIn post, or a blog article, into your tool. Ask, analyze the tone, sentence structure, and decision-making style of this author. Do they prefer data and logic, or stories and emotion? Are they formal or casual? If the AI tells you they are data-driven, formal, and concise, do not walk in telling long, winding stories. Bring spreadsheets, bring charts, get to the point. If the AI tells you they are visionary, emotional, and relationship-focused, hide the spreadsheet. Tell the story of the future. This isn't manipulation, it is translation. You are translating your value into a language they fundamentally understand. You guide the conversation by meeting them where they are, not forcing them to come to you. From reactive to proactive. The shift we are making here is from reactive improvisation to proactive strategy. Reactive is walking into a meeting and hoping you can handle whatever they throw at you. Proactive is knowing exactly what they're going to throw and having the glove ready to catch it. AI allows you to scale this preparation. You can profile 10 stakeholders in the time it used to take to profile one. But remember the core rule. AI is the tool, not the master. You are the pilot. You have to verify the insights. You have to apply the judgment. Don't let the technology make you lazy. Let it make you hyper-prepared. Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 3. Take the last difficult email you received, one where a client or colleague disagreed with you. Anonymize it, paste it into an AI tool, and ask, what is the underlying emotion behind this email? What is this person actually afraid of? See if the AI finds a pattern you missed. Use that insight to draft your reply. You have learned to cut the fluff, Chapter 1. You have learned to diagnose the pain, Chapter 2. Now you have learned to use AI to predict the future, Chapter 3. You are prepared, you are precise, but now we have to deal with the inevitable conflict. What happens when you and the client are on opposite sides of the table? You need to change the geometry of the conversation. You need to stop fighting against them and start fighting with them. You mastered preparation. Now you need alignment.
Chapter 4. Framing the narrative. The us versus the problem dynamic. The geometry of conflict. Visualize the standard business negotiation. You are sitting on one side of a conference table. The client or your boss is sitting on the other side. Physically, you are facing each other. You are in opposition. Psychologically, this sets the stage for a battle. It is me versus you. If I want a higher price, you lose money. If you want a faster timeline, I lose quality. Every gain for me looks like a loss for you. This is called a zero-sum game. And this is why most negotiations fail. When you frame a conversation as a battle of wills, human biology takes over. The amygdala activates, defenses go up. The other person stops listening to your logic and starts protecting their territory. To influence someone, you have to change the geometry of the room. You have to move from face-to-face to shoulder-to-shoulder. You need to create a dynamic where it isn't me versus you, it is us versus the problem. In this chapter, we are going to learn how to reframe every conflict. We are going to stop demanding what we want and start inviting the other person to solve a puzzle with us. Communication creates results when you turn an opponent into a partner. The case study, the salary negotiation. Let's look at one of the most difficult conversations in business, asking for a raise. Most people approach this conversation completely wrong. They make it personal. They walk in and say, I have worked really hard this year. I stayed late, I delivered the project, I think I deserve a 10% raise. Notice the language. I worked, I delivered, I deserve.
This triggers a defensive reaction in the manager. The manager is thinking about their budget. They feel pressured. They feel like they have to defend the company's money against your personal request. It becomes a battle between your ego and their budget. Now let's see how a strategic influencer handles this. A high-performing employee, let's call her Sarah, wanted a significant salary adjustment. She didn't talk about her feelings. She didn't talk about deserving anything. She did her research. She found the market rate for her specific role and skill set. She realized she was being paid 15% below the market average. She walked into the meeting and laid a piece of paper on the table. It was a chart showing the industry standard salaries. She sat back and said, "I've been looking at the market data, and it looks like there's a significant discrepancy between the market value of this role and where we are currently priced. This gap is a risk because it makes it hard for us to retain top talent long term. How do we solve this alignment issue?" Do you see the shift? She didn't ask for a raise. She pointed out a market discrepancy. She didn't make it about her bank account. She made it about retaining talent. She didn't say, "Give me money." She asked, "How do we solve this?" The problem was no longer her greed. The problem was the data. Her manager didn't have to fight her. The manager looked at the paper and agreed that the data was the problem. They were now on the same side of the table, figuring out how to fix a budget issue. She got the raise in 48 hours. This is how you win clients and promotions. You remove your ego from the equation and focus entirely on the external standard. The externalization framework. This technique is called externalizing the problem. In any high-stakes conversation, there are three entities: you, the other person, and the problem. If you attack the person, they fight back. If you attack the problem together, you bond. Here is how you do this in 3 common scenarios. Scenario 1, the client price pushback. The adversarial approach: our price is high because we are the best. Take it or leave it. The us versus problem approach: I understand the budget is tight. The challenge is that to get the results you want, the materials cost X. If we cut the budget, we compromise the result. How can we adjust the scope to fit the budget without breaking the project? The enemy is the cost of materials, scope, not you. Scenario 2, the missed deadline. The adversarial approach: you guys are late again. This is unacceptable. The us versus problem approach: we are currently 3 days behind schedule. The bottleneck seems to be the approval process. Let's look at the workflow together. What can we change to remove that friction so the team can move faster? The enemy is the approval process, bottleneck, not the team. Scenario 3, the disagreement on strategy. The adversarial approach: I think your idea is wrong. The us versus problem approach: I see where you're going with that. My concern is that the data suggests the customer won't click that button. Let's look at the user testing results. What does the evidence say? The enemy is the user data, not your opinion.
In every single one of these examples, you are moving the conflict away from the relationship and placing it on a third object: the budget, the timeline, or the data. You guide the conversation by pointing at the third object. You're essentially saying, "I am on your team, but this problem is in our way. Help me move it." Implementation, the pronoun shift. To execute this, you need to change your grammar. Adversarial language is heavy on I and you. I need you to do this. You didn't send the file. I can't agree to that. Collaborative language is heavy on we and the. How do we solve this? The timeline is tight. What does the data suggest? This is a subtle psychological trigger. When you say we, you are subconsciously signaling alliance. You're signaling that you are already partners. Try this script the next time you have to deliver bad news. Instead of, "I can't deliver this by Friday," say, "The timeline is shorter than the production time required to do this right. If we rush, we risk errors. How do we want to prioritize? Speed or accuracy?" You are forcing them to make a business decision with you rather than accepting an apology from you. The physical shift. Finally, use your body language to reinforce the frame. If you are in a physical conference room, try to sit next to the person or at a 90-degree angle rather than directly across from them. If you are presenting a document, put the document on the table between you. Point at the document, look at the paper, not at their face when discussing the conflict. This directs the negative energy toward the inanimate object. It protects the relationship. Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 4. Identify one ongoing friction point in your business. Maybe it's a difficult client, a stalled project, or a disagreement with a partner. In your next interaction, do not use the word you when describing the problem. Instead of saying, "You are delaying this," say, "The delay is caused by." Instead of saying, "You aren't paying enough," say, "The budget doesn't match the scope." Externalize the enemy. Invite them to fight it with you. Once you master this, you stop having arguments. You start having strategy sessions. But even with the perfect frame, you still need to read the person across from you. You need to know when they are buying in and when they are checking out. You need to read the data that isn't on the spreadsheet, the human data. You mastered the frame. Now you need emotional intelligence.
Chapter 5, Emotional Intelligence is Data Processing. The myth of being nice. In the corporate world, emotional intelligence, or EQ, has a branding problem. Most people hear EQ and think of empathy, kindness, or soft skills. They think it means being the person who remembers birthdays or asked about your weekend. While that is polite, it is not strategic. In the context of high-stakes business, emotional intelligence is not about feelings. It is about data processing. Think of a negotiation like a high-speed server. There are thousands of data points being exchanged every second. The words are only 10% of that data. The rest is nonverbal. It is the microsecond pause before they answer a price question. It is the slight tightening of the jaw when you mention a timeline. It is the shift in posture, from leaning in, interest, to leaning back, skepticism. Most professionals are so focused on their own script, their slides, their pitch, their agenda, that they ignore this data stream completely. They are flying blind. Strategic EQ is the ability to read the room in real time. It is the ability to process human behavior as raw data, analyze it instantly, and adjust your strategy on the fly. If you stick to your script when the data says the room has turned against you, you aren't being persistent, you are being oblivious. Communication creates results only when it lands. If the recipient has closed the door and you keep throwing packages at the porch, you aren't delivering value. You are just making a mess. The case study, the crisis manager. Let's look at how a master operator handles this data. A crisis management consultant was brought in to present a turnaround strategy to a board of directors. The company was bleeding money. Tensions were high. She began her presentation. She had the data, the charts, and the solution. But 5 minutes in, she noticed a shift. The CFO, who was the key decision maker, crossed his arms. He stopped looking at the screen and started looking at the table. He went silent. Most presenters would ignore this. They would think, I just need to get through the slides. If I explain the logic, he will get it. They would talk louder, they would talk faster. The consultant did the opposite. She treated his body language as a stop sign. She stopped her presentation mid-sentence. She turned off the screen. She looked directly at the CFO and said, I can tell something isn't sitting right. What am I missing? The room went dead silent. It was a risky move. But the CFO looked up, he uncrossed his arms, he said, I'm looking at these projections and honestly, we don't have the cash flow to survive the first 3 months of this plan. We'll be bankrupt before the turnaround happens. That objection wasn't in the brief. It wasn't in the emails. It was a hidden deal killer. Because she paused, they were able to address the cash flow issue right there. They adjusted the timeline. They structured a bridge loan. They saved the company. If she had kept presenting, the CFO would have let her finish, thanked her, and then voted no the moment she left the room. She didn't save the deal because she was smart. She saved it because she processed the visual data and had the courage to act on it.
This is how you win clients. You stop presenting to the room you expected and start presenting to the room that actually exists. The EQ dashboard, what to scan for. How do you develop this radar? You need to build an internal EQ dashboard. When you are in a meeting, you are running 2 tracks in your brain. Track 1 is your content, what you are saying. Track 2 is the scanner, watching how it lands. Here are the 3 specific data points you need to scan for. 1. The baseline shift. Everyone has a baseline behavior. Some people are naturally fidgety, some people are naturally stoic. Don't analyze the behavior itself, analyze the change in behavior. If a loud person suddenly goes quiet, that is data. If a still person starts checking their watch, that is data. If a friendly person suddenly switches to formal language, that is a red alert. 2. The micro-expression, the flinch. This happens when you mention a specific variable, usually price, timeline, or scope. Watch their eyes when you say the number. Do they blink rapidly? Do they look at their colleague? Do they purse their lips? The flinch tells you where the pain is. If they flinch at the timeline but not at the price, stop selling the price. You have won that point. Focus entirely on reassuring them about the schedule. The tone drop. In a remote world where you might not see faces clearly, audio is your primary data source. Watch for the energy drop. If the client is saying, "Yes, that sounds good," but the pitch of their voice drops at the end of the sentence, they are lying. Yes with a downward inflection often means, "I am saying yes to get you to stop talking, but I intend to do nothing." Tactical framework, the labeling technique. Once you spot the data, the crossed arms, the silence, the flinch, what do? You cannot say, "You look angry." That is accusatory. It puts them on the defensive. You need to use a technique called labeling. This comes from FBI hostage negotiation tactics. You label the emotion you see without judging it. Use these specific scripts to call out the elephant in the room. The seem label. It seems like you have some hesitation about that last point. The sound label. It sounds like there is a concern about the timeline. The feel label. I get the feeling that this solution might be missing a key piece for you. Notice the phrasing. You aren't saying "you are wrong," you are saying "it seems." This gives them an out. If you're wrong, they can correct you, but usually they will say, "Actually, yes, my concern is..." And just like that, the hidden objection is on the table. You guide the conversation by making the invisible visible. You bring the shadow into the light where you can deal with it. The AI paradox. A quick note on artificial intelligence in this context. We talked about AI for preparation, but in the room, emotional intelligence is the one advantage you have over any algorithm. AI can process text. It can process logic. It is getting better at sentiment analysis, but it cannot yet sit in a room and feel the tension shift when a CEO looks at her watch. However, you can use AI to train your EQ. The post-game analysis. Record your Zoom calls with permission. Afterward, feed the transcript into an AI tool. Ask it to analyze the sentiment of the prospect in the second half of the call. Where did their engagement drop? Did their sentence length get shorter? The AI might show you that after you mentioned the price at minute 14, the prospect's answers went from 20 words on average to 3 words. That is a pattern you missed in the moment. Now you know, next time you need to pause after the price and check for buy-in. AI makes you faster, but your biological hardware, your brain, is the ultimate sensor for human emotion. Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 5. In your next conversation, whether it's with a spouse, a colleague, or a client, I want you to play the stop game. The moment you notice a shift in their body language, they look away, they sigh, they cross arms, stop talking. Do not finish your sentence. Just stop. Pause for 2 seconds, then use a label. It seems like you're thinking about something else, or it seems like that didn't land right. Watch what happens. You'll be shocked at how quickly the truth comes out. When you master this, you stop having surprises. You never get the email a week later saying, "We decided to go in a different direction," and wonder why. You'll know exactly why because you saw it happen in the room. But once you've called out the elephant in the room, once you have stopped the pitch and labeled the fear, what do you do next? You have created a moment of truth. Now you need to let that truth sink in. You need to resist the urge to fix it immediately. You need to use the most powerful, underutilized tool in business communication. You mastered the scan. Now you need the silence.
Chapter 6: The Authority of Silence. The loudest sound in business. Silence is the loudest sound in the business world. For most professionals, silence is terrifying. It feels like a vacuum. It feels like failure. When we are pitching a client and we stop talking and they don't immediately applaud or agree, panic sets in. Our brain screams, "They hate it, they are bored, say something, save the moment." So we start talking. We fill the void. We add a discount. We qualify our statement. We ramble. I mean, we can obviously be flexible on that price. If that timeline doesn't work, we can adjust. Just to clarify what I meant, in that moment, you have just negotiated against yourself. You had the leverage and you gave it away because you were afraid of the quiet. This chapter is about overcoming that fear. We are going to talk about the authority of silence. In high-stakes environments, negotiations, boardrooms, crisis management, silence is not an absence of communication, it is a weapon. It is a specific, tactical tool used to force the other side to reveal their hand. If you cannot sit in silence, you cannot lead a room. Communication creates results. But sometimes the most powerful communication is saying absolutely nothing. The psychology of the void. Why are we so afraid of silence? It is a biological instinct. In a social tribe, silence usually meant rejection. If the tribe went quiet, you were in trouble. So we are hardwired to keep the connection alive with noise. But in business, the dynamic is different. The person who is most comfortable with silence is the person who holds the most power. Think about a junior employee presenting to a CEO. The junior employee talks non-stop. The CEO sits back, listens, and maybe asks one question. Who has the authority? The quiet one. When you rush to fill the silence, you signal anxiety. You signal that you need their approval. When you embrace the silence, you signal that you are comfortable with your position. You don't need to over-explain because the value is self-evident. This is how you win clients. You stop chasing them with words and let them come to you in the silence. The case study, the 18-second wait. Let's look at a legendary example of this in action. There was a VP of sales negotiating an enterprise software contract worth $2 million. It was the final meeting. The stakes were massive. The client was a tough negotiator, a procurement director whose entire job was to grind vendors down on price. The VP put the contract on the table. He looked the director in the eye and said, "The price is $2 million. That includes implementation and 3 years of support. That is the final number." And then he stopped. He didn't say, "But we can look at it." He didn't say, "How does that sound?" He shut his mouth. He leaned back. The procurement director stared at him. The VP stared back. 1 second passed. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. In a meeting, 10 seconds of silence feels like 10 hours. The VP's internal team was sweating. They wanted to jump in. They wanted to offer a 5% discount just to break the tension. But the VP held the line. 15 seconds, 18 seconds. Finally, the procurement director sighed. He looked down at the paper and said, "Okay, if that's the number, we need to make sure the implementation starts on Monday." He signed.
If the VP had spoken at the 10-second mark, if he had said, "We might be able to do $1.9 million," he would have lost $100,000 instantly. He would have signaled weakness. The silence forced the director to process the reality: they aren't moving. I have to decide. The first person to break the silence usually concedes ground. The VP knew that. He used the authority of silence to close the deal without giving away a single dime. Tactical framework: the anchor and the pause. How do you train yourself to do this? It is physically difficult. Your adrenaline will be spiking. You need a framework. I call this the anchor and the pause. This is used for stating terms, prices, or difficult news. Step 1, the anchor. State your point clearly, concisely, and firmly. Do not use or maybe. The project fee is $50,000. We cannot meet that deadline. I need you to redo this report.
Step 2, the shutdown. Physically close your mouth. If you are on a video call, take your hands off the keyboard so you aren't tempted to type. Count to 4 in your head. 1, Mississippi. 2, Mississippi. 3, Mississippi. 4, Mississippi. Most people will break before you get to 4. Why this works? When you drop an anchor, a price, or a hard fact, the other person needs cognitive processing time. They need to calculate, feel the emotion, and formulate a response. If you keep talking, you interrupt their processing. You distract them. By pausing, you are giving them the space to realize they have to deal with the anchor. You are not being rude, you are being patient. Tactical framework: the processing pause. There is a second way to use silence: defensive silence. This is for when you are asked a difficult question. A client asks, "Why is your competitor 20% cheaper?" Or a boss asks, "Why did we miss this target?" The instinct is to answer immediately to show you're sharp, but rushing an answer often leads to defensive, weak responses. Instead, use the processing pause. When they ask the question, wait 3 full seconds before you answer. Look thoughtful. This does 3 things. It calms your amygdala. It stops the fight or flight panic response. It signals confidence. Only confident people take their time to answer. Insecure people rush. And it adds weight to your answer. Because you waited, people assume your answer is more thoughtful and true. You guide the conversation by controlling the tempo. If they are talking fast and you answer slow, you slow the whole room down to your pace. The remote advantage, the mute button. For those of you working remotely, you have a superpower that negotiators in the 1980s didn't have: the mute button. In a heated Zoom negotiation or a difficult team call, use the mute button as a physical restraint. When you state your price, hit mute. This physically prevents you from muttering a softener like, "Does that make sense?" or "We can talk about it." You are literally silencing your insecurity. Keep your finger hovering over the unmute button, but do not click it until the other person has finished their entire thought. Often, on Zoom, there is a lag. You might think they are done, but they are just taking a breath. If you jump in, you cut them off. If you stay muted, they will keep talking. And often, if you let them keep talking, they will talk themselves out of their own objection. AI makes you faster, but silence makes you stronger. Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 6. I call it the Count to 4 challenge. In every conversation you have today, whether it is ordering coffee, talking to your spouse, or leading a meeting, do not answer any question immediately. When someone stops talking, count to 4 in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then respond. You will feel the tension. It will feel awkward. But watch the other person. They might add more detail. They might clarify what they meant.
They will look at you with more focus. You are training your nervous system to tolerate the void. Silence is the canvas upon which you paint your influence. If the canvas is cluttered with noise, the picture is a mess. Clean the canvas. Make your words count. Now we have stripped away the fluff. We have learned to listen. We have learned to pause. You have the structure. Now you need the substance. Logic makes people think, but it doesn't make them act. To drive action, you need to bypass the logical brain and hit the emotional brain. You don't need more data. You need a narrative. You mastered the silence. Now you need the story.
Chapter 7. Storytelling as a Business Strategy. The Data Delusion. There is a lie that persists in the business world. The lie is that the numbers speak for themselves. We believe that if we build a spreadsheet with enough rows or a slide deck with enough charts, the logic will be undeniable. We think that decision makers are rational robots who input data and output the correct decision. That is not how human brains work. Neuroscience tells us that decisions are made in the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, and then justified by the neocortex, the logical center. We feel the decision first, and then we look for the data to back it up. If you lead with data, you are speaking to the part of the brain that creates objections. You are asking for analysis. If you lead with a story, you are speaking to the part of the brain that creates desire. You are asking for imagination. Data informs, but stories compel. This chapter is not about writing fiction. It isn't about telling jokes or anecdotes about your weekend. It is about strategic narrative. It is about wrapping your solution in a context that makes the client see themselves in a better future. If your pitch is forgettable, it is likely because you provided information without emotion. Today, we are going to fix that. The case study, 1,000 songs in your pocket. The most famous example of this comes from 2001. The MP3 player market was already crowded. There were devices from Creative and Rio. They were marketing their products the way most businesses do, with specs. Their ad said, 5 gigabytes of storage, FireWire connectivity, 10-hour battery life. Technically, this was accurate. Logically, it was impressive. Emotionally, it was dead. It required the customer to do the math, like, okay, 5 gigabytes, how many songs is that? Is that a lot? Then Steve Jobs walked onto a stage. He didn't talk about gigabytes. He didn't talk about transfer speeds. He pulled a small white device out of his jeans and said 5 words, 1,000 songs in your pocket. That is not a spec. That is a story. 1,000 songs is the scope. In your pocket is the lifestyle. In one sentence, he painted a picture of a transformation. He took a technical feature, storage capacity, and translated it into a human benefit, freedom. People didn't buy the iPod because they wanted a hard drive. They bought it because they wanted the feeling of having their entire music library with them on the subway. That phrase, 1,000 songs in your pocket, was sticky. It was repeatable. You could tell your friend at a bar what the iPod did without needing a spec sheet. This is how you win clients. You don't sell the drill, you sell the hole in the wall. You don't sell the software, you sell the Friday afternoon where they get to go home early because the software did the work for them. The narrative framework, the hero, and the guide. How do you build this narrative for a boring B2B product? You need to understand the casting. Most companies cast themselves as the hero of the story. We are the market leaders. We have the best technology. We won this award. This is a mistake. In your client's life, they are the hero. They are the ones trying to save their company, get a promotion, or solve a crisis. If you try to be the hero, you are competing with them. You need to be the guide. Think of Star Wars.
The client is Luke Skywalker. They are talented but overwhelmed. They have a problem, the Empire or market shifts. You are not Luke. You are Yoda. You are the one with the plan. You are the one who hands them the lightsaber, your product, so they can win the battle. Communication creates results when you make the client the star of the movie. Tactical workflow, the before and after bridge. To write a strategic story, do not start with once upon a time. Start with the status quo. Use the before and after bridge framework. Step 1, the before, the villain. Describe their current world with the problem. Make it visceral. Example, right now, your finance team is spending the last week of every month manually reconciling spreadsheets. It's stressful, it leads to errors, and it keeps them from doing strategic analysis. Step 2, the after, the promised land. Describe the world where the problem is solved. Do not mention your product yet, just describe the outcome. Example, imagine a world where the books close automatically on the last day of the month. Your team walks in on the first with clean data, ready to advise the board on strategy instead of fixing typos. Step 3, the bridge, your solution. Now, and only now, introduce your product as the vehicle to get from before to after. Example, our software automates that reconciliation. We bridge the gap between manual entry and strategic insight. Do you see the difference? A bad pitch says, our software has an OCR scanning feature. A story pitch says, we take your team from data entry clerks to strategic advisors. You are selling an identity shift. You are selling a transformation. The so what test. To test if your story is working, use the so what test. Look at your slide deck or your email draft. Read a sentence, then ask, so what? If the answer is another technical fact, you failed. If the answer is a business result or an emotional relief, you won. Statement. We have 24/7 customer support. So what? So if the server crashes at 3 a.m., you can call us. So what? So you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night in a panic. The story. We sell you a good night's sleep. You will never have to wake up at 3 a.m. to fix a server crash again. Statement. We use 256-bit encryption. So what? So your data is secure. So what? So you don't get sued for a data breach. The story. We ensure your reputation against the catastrophe of a leak. Dig until you hit the emotion. Dig until you hit the human impact. Making the story portable. Here is the most important reason to use storytelling. In B2B sales, the person you are talking to is rarely the only decision maker. They have to go talk to their boss and the CFO and the procurement team. You are not in that room. If you gave them data, they will forget the numbers. If you gave them a spec sheet, they will lose it. But if you gave them a story, this software gives us our weekends back. They can repeat that. A story is a portable container for your value. It travels through the organization without you. You guide the conversation even when you aren't physically present because you planted a narrative that is easy to share. Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 7. Take your standard elevator pitch, the one-sentence description of what you do. Right now, it probably describes what you do. For example, I am a graphic designer. I want you to rewrite it to describe the transformation you provide. Old, I design logos and websites. New, I help startups look like Fortune 500 companies so they can raise capital. Old, I sell insurance. New, I help families protect their financial future so a tragedy doesn't become a bankruptcy. Write out your before and after story. Practice it. You have now mastered the story. You know how to make them feel the need for your solution. But even with a great story, people are skeptical. They will nod their heads, but inside, they are holding back. They are thinking things they aren't saying. You need to hear the unspoken objections. You need to decode the subtext. You mastered the story, now you need the subtext. Chapter 8, The Feedback Loop. Listen to what isn't said. The lie of active listening. If you have ever taken a corporate communication workshop, you have been taught active listening. You were taught to nod your head. You were taught to say, uh-huh. You were taught to paraphrase what the other person said. So what I hear you saying is, I want you to forget about all of that. Active listening, as it is taught in most business schools, is performative. It is about looking like you are listening. It is a social nicety. But in high-stakes business, being polite doesn't get you paid. Being accurate does. Strategic listening is different. It is not about reflecting their words back to them. It is about decoding the subtext. It is about understanding that what people say is rarely what they mean. Humans are protective. We hide our insecurities, our fears, and our lack of authority behind safe, logical complaints. We complain about the price when we are actually afraid of the commitment. We complain about the design when we are actually afraid of the launch. If you fix the surface complaint without addressing the hidden fear, you are playing a game of whack-a-mole. You will fix the price and they will complain about the timeline. You will fix the timeline, and they will complain about the contract terms. You are chasing symptoms. Communication creates results when you stop chasing symptoms and start treating the disease. In this chapter, we are going to learn how to hear what isn't being said. We are going to learn how to spot the red herrings, the fake objections that distract you from the real deal breakers. The case study, the blue problem. Let's look at a classic example of a feedback loop gone wrong. A project manager at a digital agency was overseeing the launch of a new website for a major client. The deadline was 2 weeks away. Suddenly, the client started sending emails. First, it was the font. I don't think this serif font conveys our modern values. The PM changed the font. Then it was the color palette. This blue feels a little too aggressive. Can we try a softer blue? The PM changed the blue. Then it was the photography. These stock photos look too staged. The PM was frustrated. He told his team, this client is impossible. They are nitpicking everything. He was ready to fight them on the scope of work. But then he paused. He looked at the pattern. The client hadn't complained for 3 months. Now, 2 weeks before the launch, they were picking apart tiny details. Why? He realized it wasn't about the font. It wasn't about the blue. It was about the date.
The client was terrified of the launch. They weren't ready internally. Their content wasn't done. Their sales team wasn't trained. But admitting that would make them look incompetent. So instead of saying, we aren't ready, they subconsciously sabotaged the project to buy time. The PM got on the phone. He didn't talk about the color blue. He said, I've noticed we're going back and forth on design details quite a bit. Usually when this happens, it's because there is some anxiety about the go-live date. How is the team feeling about the 15th? Do we need to adjust the timeline to give you more breathing room? There was a long silence. Then the client exhaled. Honestly, we are drowning. We don't have the product descriptions written. If we launch on the 15th, the site will be empty. The font was fine. The blue was fine. The fear was the timeline. Once they moved the launch date by 2 weeks, the design complaints vanished instantly. This is how you win clients. You don't win by being a pixel pusher who does exactly what they ask. You win by being a strategic partner who solves the problem they are afraid to articulate. The law of the red herring. In business, a red herring is a misleading clue. It is a logical objection that masks an emotional blocker. How do you spot them? You look for disproportionate friction. If a client is screaming about a $500 line item in a $50,000 contract, that is disproportionate.
If a stakeholder is blocking a massive initiative because of a minor formatting issue in the report, that is disproportionate. When the reaction doesn't match the stimulus, you are dealing with a red herring. The real issue is almost always one of three things. Loss of control, they feel like you are driving too fast and they are just passengers. Loss of face, they are afraid this decision will make them look bad to their boss. Loss of budget, they don't have the money, but they are too embarrassed to admit they can't afford you. If you argue logic against a red herring, you lose. You can prove that the $500 fee is standard, but you won't get the signature because the $500 isn't the problem. You guide the conversation by bypassing the distraction and aiming for the root cause.
Tactical framework, the it seems audit. How do you surface the truth without offending them? You cannot say, "You are lying to me." You use the it seems audit. This is a labeling technique used by hostage negotiators to identify the hidden emotion. When you hear a red herring, do not defend your position. Instead, label their underlying state. Script 1 for the micromanager. The distraction, they are CCing 10 people and checking your work every hour. The audit, it seems like you are worried that this project is going to drift off track if you aren't watching it closely. Why it works? You are validating their fear of losing control. Usually, they will say, "Yes, the last vendor screwed this up and I got blamed. Now you know the real trauma." Script 2 for the indecisive client. The distraction, we just need to run this by the committee again, for the third time. The audit, it seems like there is someone on your team who still isn't fully sold on this direction. Why it works, you are calling out the hidden stakeholder. They might admit, "Yeah, the CFO hates it." Now you know you need to sell the CFO, not the person you are talking to. Script 3 for the price haggler. The distraction, can you sharpen your pencil on this quote? The audit, it seems like you see the value, but the budget for this specific quarter is already allocated. Why it works? You give them a safe way to admit they are broke right now. They might say, "Exactly. If you can bill us in Q3, we can sign today." Notice the recurring phrase, "it seems." This is non-threatening. It is an observation, not an accusation. It invites them to correct you or confirm the truth. The AI feedback loop. Let's integrate artificial intelligence. In the digital world, feedback often comes in high volumes, hundreds of emails, support tickets, or reviews. You cannot have a deep conversation with every single data point, but AI makes you faster, not weaker. You can use AI to perform strategic listening at scale. Most companies use simple keyword analysis. They count how many times people say slow or expensive. That is surface level. Try this instead. Take your last 50 customer support tickets or emails and feed them into an LLM. Use this prompt. Analyze the subtext of these emails. Don't just tell me what they're complained about. Tell me the underlying emotion. Are they frustrated, confused, or disappointed? What is the unspoken expectation that we failed to meet? The AI might tell you, while customers are complaining about the login process, the underlying sentiment is distrust. They feel the security steps are excessive because they don't trust your brand with their data yet. That is a massive insight. Fixing the login button won't fix the distrust. You need to fix your brand messaging. Use AI to listen to the whisper behind the shout. The negative space. Finally, you must learn to listen to the negative space. What are they not talking about? If you are pitching a marketing strategy and the client talks about brand awareness, clicks, and likes, but never mentions revenue or sales, that is a siren. It means they might not be measured on revenue, or it means they are terrified of being held accountable for revenue. If you pitch a revenue-focused strategy to a person who is hiding from revenue metrics, you will scare them away. Strategic listening requires you to notice the void. I noticed we haven't discussed the implementation timeline yet. We haven't talked about who ultimately signs off on this budget. Bring the negative space into the conversation. I noticed we've talked a lot about the creative, but not much about the ROI targets. Is that something we need to define now, or is that not a priority for this quarter? Their answer will tell you exactly how to close the deal.
Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 8. Go through your current stalls deals or problem projects. Find the one where the client is being difficult, unresponsive, or picky. Stop trying to solve the surface complaint. Ask yourself, what are they protecting? Are they protecting their budget? Are they protecting their ego? Are they protecting their job? Then send an email or get on a call and use a label. It seems like we are stuck on surface issue. I want to make sure I'm not missing the bigger picture. Is there a concern about hidden fear that we should address? Be brave enough to ask the real question. When you clear the red herrings, you clear the path to the signature. You have listened, you have understood, you have removed the emotional blockers. Now there is nothing left to do but close. But most people fumble at the finish line. They get timid. They ask for permission instead of assuming the sale. You have earned the right to lead. Now you need to take them across the line. You mastered the feedback. Now you need the commitment.
Chapter 9, The Assumptive Close. The Permission Trap. You have done the work. You stripped away the fluff, Chapter 1. You diagnosed the problem, Chapter 2. You built the narrative, Chapter 7. You handled the objections, Chapter 8. Now you are at the finish line. The pitch is over. The room goes quiet. And this is the moment where 90% of professionals destroy their own momentum. They lean forward, smile nervously, and ask, "So, what do you guys think?" Or, "Do you want to move forward with this?" This is the permission trap. By asking these questions, you are handing the authority back to the client. You are placing the burden of the decision entirely on their shoulders. You are asking them to take a leap of faith. And when human beings are asked to take a leap of faith, their instinct is to freeze. They say, "Let us think about it." They say, "We'll get back to you." The momentum dies. The deal enters the maybe zone, which is where deals go to die. Strategic influencers do not ask for permission to proceed, they assume it. They stop asking if we do this and start discussing when we do this. This is the assumptive close. It is not about being aggressive, it is about being a leader. If you truly believe your solution is the right one, if you diagnosed the pain and prescribed the cure, why would you ask if they want to take the medicine? You should be handing them the water and telling them how often to take it. You guide the conversation all the way to the signature. The psychology of mental ownership. Why does the assumptive close work? It works because it bypasses decision fatigue. Making a big decision, buying a house, signing a contract, hiring a consultant, is stressful. It carries risk. The logical brain is looking for reasons to pause. When you ask, "Do you want to buy?" you trigger that stress. But when you discuss the logistics of the future, you trigger mental ownership. Let's look at the real business example from the real estate world. A real estate agent was struggling to close sales. She was doing everything right, showing great houses, being polite, and answering questions. At the end of a tour, she would always ask, "So, do you like this house? Do you want to make an offer?" Most buyers would hesitate. "It's nice, but we need to see a few more." She decided to change her script. She stopped asking for the sale. Instead, she started asking logistical questions about living there. Walking into the spare bedroom, she wouldn't say, "This is a nice bedroom." She would ask, "Where would you put your desk in this office? Would it face the window or the wall?" The buyer would look at the window. They would imagine their desk. They would imagine sitting there on a Tuesday morning drinking coffee. By answering the question, they had to mentally move in. She asked, "Would you put the TV over the fireplace or on the stand?" She asked, "Which kid gets this room?" Her close rate jumped 35% in 3 months. Why? Because she stopped asking, "Do you want this?" and started asking, "How will you use this?" By the time they got back to the front door, they had already arranged their furniture in their heads.
The decision was made before the question was ever asked. This is how you win clients. You help them visualize the future so clearly that saying no feels like losing something they already own. Tactical framework, the logistics bridge. In B2B sales or leadership, you can't ask where they will put the sofa, but you can use the logistics bridge. The logistics bridge is a technique where you transition from the presentation immediately into implementation details. Do not pause at the end of your slide deck. Do not say the end. Instead, pull up a timeline. The script is, based on what we discussed, if we want to hit that launch date of October 1st, we need to kick off the onboarding by next Monday. Who on your team needs to be in that kickoff meeting? Is it just you, or should we include the IT director? Look at what just happened. You didn't ask, do you want to hire us? You asked, who needs to be in the kickoff meeting? To answer that question, they have to assume they have hired you. Oh, Dave from IT needs to be there. Great, I'll send the invite to you and Dave for Monday. I'll send the agreement over this afternoon so we can get that administrative stuff out of the way before the call. The contract is no longer a decision. It is just administrative stuff that needs to happen before the real work, the meeting with Dave. Communication creates results when you focus on the work, not the transaction. Tactical framework, the option clause. Sometimes you can't just assume the kickoff date. Sometimes there are genuine variables. In that case, use the option clause. Never ask a yes or no question. Do you want to sign? Do you want to start with the full package, or would you prefer the phased rollout to ease the team into it? Both A and B are yes. I think the phased rollout is safer. Excellent choice. That allows us to test the waters. I'll write up the scope for the phased rollout and get it over to you. You gave them autonomy. You let them choose, but you framed the choice so that both roads lead to the deal. This relieves the pressure. They're not deciding whether to work with you, they're deciding how to work with you. The next steps slide. Here is a practical action you can apply to every presentation deck you build from now on. Delete the thank you/Q&A slide at the end. Replace it with a slide titled Proposed Next Steps. List 3 bullets. Sign agreement by Friday. Kickoff call next Tuesday. Audit begins next Wednesday. Leave the slide on the screen. When you finish your pitch, point to the slide. This is the timeline I mapped out to make sure we hit your goals. Does this timing work for your team, or is next Tuesday too soon for a kickoff? Now you are negotiating the Tuesday, not the contract. If they say, Tuesday is too soon, we have a board meeting, you say, no problem, let's do Thursday. You have successfully closed the deal. You are just scheduling now. You guide the conversation by placing the map on the table. Leaders have maps. Vendors have brochures. Be the leader. The fear of being pushy. I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds pushy. I don't want to be aggressive. Let's reframe that. Imagine you have a leaking pipe in your basement. You call a plumber. The plumber looks at it and says, "Yep, it's leaking." Then he stands there. He asks, "So, do you want me to fix it? I can fix it if you want. What do you think?" You would be annoyed. You called him to fix it. You want him to say, "It's leaking. I have the part in the truck. I can fix it right now. It'll take 20 minutes. Show me where the water shutoff is." That isn't pushy. That is helpful. That is professional. Your clients have a leaking pipe. They have a problem they can't solve. They are tired. They are confused. They want you to take charge. They want you to tell them where the water shutoff is. When you use the assumptive clause, you are saying, "I know how to solve this. I am confident in the solution. Let's get to work. That is a relief to the client. Insecurity asks for permission. Competence assumes the second step.
The AI accelerator, the contract drafter. How does artificial intelligence speed this up? The friction often happens after the verbal yes. You agree to move forward, but then it takes 3 days to get the contract out. In those 3 days, the excitement fades, doubt creeps in. AI makes you faster, not weaker. You should be able to generate the contract during the meeting or immediately after. Have a template ready. Use AI to fill in the variables. Draft a statement of work based on these meeting notes. Include the phased rollout option we discussed and set the start date for next Monday. Send the document within 15 minutes of hanging up the phone. Speed signals competence. If you wait 24 hours, you are just another vendor. If you send it in 15 minutes, you are a partner who is ready to run. Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 9. Review your email outbox. Look at the last 5 proposals you sent. Did you end them with, "Let me know what you think," or "I look forward to hearing from you"? If so, you are in the permission trap. Rewrite your next closing email using the logistics bridge. I've attached the agreement. To stick to the timeline we discussed, we should aim to have this signed by Friday so we can book the kickoff for Tuesday. Does 2 p.m. Tuesday work for your team? Stop asking if they want to dance. Just hold out your hand and start moving to the music. You have now mastered the entire life cycle of the conversation. You kept it brief, you listened to the subtext, you told the story, you assumed the close. You have the deal. The client is yours. But you are only one person. You have only so many hours in the day. If you want to grow, if you want to influence thousands of people instead of just one, you cannot be in every room. You need to clone yourself. You need to build a machine that communicates for you. You mastered the close. Now, you need the scale.
Chapter 10. Automating your influence. Scale your voice. The bottleneck is you. We have spent 9 chapters building a high-performance engine for influence. You know how to strip away the noise, diagnose the pain, frame the narrative, and close the deal. But there is one problem left, a fatal flaw in the system. You. You are biological. You need to sleep. You can only be in one room at a time. You can only take 10 calls a day before your brain turns to mush. If your influence relies entirely on your physical presence, on you being on the Zoom call, or you standing at the podium, you have a ceiling. You are trading time for influence, and time is a finite resource. To truly win, you must break the link between your time and your impact. You need to clone yourself. This isn't sci-fi. This is asynchronous leverage. It is the final step in the masterclass. It is about building systems that communicate for you while you are doing deep work or while you are sleeping. Communication creates results, but automated communication creates scale. In this chapter, we are going to look at how to use video, content, and data to be in 10 places at once. We are going to turn your voice from a service into an asset. The case study, the Async founder. Let's look at how this changes a business. A startup founder was drowning in update calls. Every month, she had 12 investors who wanted to know how the company was doing. Each investor wanted a 30-minute call. That is 6 hours of talking, plus preparation time, plus the switching costs of interrupting her day. She was losing 2 full days a month just explaining what she had already done. She decided to stop taking the calls. She switched to asynchronous video. On the first of the month, she recorded a single 5-minute video using Loom. She pulled up the dashboard, she walked through the numbers, she highlighted the wins,
She admitted the challenges. She ended with a clear ask for help. She sent that one video to all 12 investors. The result? First, she saved 12 hours a month. That is 144 hours a year, 3.5 work weeks given back to her to actually run the company. But the surprising result was the feedback. The investors loved it. Why? Because they are busy too. They didn't want to sit on a 30-minute call for 5 minutes of information. They watched the video at 2x speed while eating lunch. They felt more informed, not less. She built a reputation for transparency and efficiency. Her influence grew because she respected their time. This is how you win clients and investors. You give them high-signal information on their schedule, not yours. Tactical framework. The zero meeting update. How do you implement this? Look at your calendar for next week. Identify every status update meeting. These are the meetings where you are just reporting information. Weekly stand-up. Client progress report. Project review. Cancel them. Replace them with a video memo. Here's the script for a perfect video memo. Keep it under 3 minutes. The headline. Hey team, here's the update on Project Alpha for the week of November 24th. Bottom line, we are on track for the deadline, but we have one blocker in design. The screen share. Don't just talk, show the work. Share your screen. Let me show you the mock-ups. Here's V1, here's V2. Notice how V2 solves the client's navigation issue. Visuals anchor the message. The blocker. We're stuck on the API integration. Dave, I need you to look at this code snippet by Wednesday. The call to action. No need to reply unless you have questions. Dave, please ping me on Slack once you check the code. Thanks. You just replaced a 30-minute meeting with a 3-minute video. If you have a team of 5 people, you just saved the company 2.5 hours of productivity. You guide the conversation by controlling the format. When you send a video, there is no rambling, there is no small talk, there is just the work. The system of self-correction. Scaling your voice isn't just about output, it's also about input. How do you get better at influence if you don't have a coach watching you? You build a data loop. Let's look at another real business example. A middle manager was struggling to connect with her team. Some people loved her direct style, others felt she was abrasive. She felt like she was guessing every time she spoke. She started a simple habit. She created a conversation log. After every high-stakes interaction, a negotiation, a feedback session, or a pitch, she took 30 seconds to write down 3 things. Who was it? E.g., John, engineering lead. What was my approach? E.g., direct, data-heavy, short. What was the result? E.g., he shut down, became defensive, agreement delayed. After 6 months, she looked at the log. A pattern screamed at her. She realized that every time she used a direct data approach with the engineering team, it failed. But when she used it with the finance team, it worked perfectly. With engineering, she needed to use the consultative, questioning approach. She adapted. She stopped treating everyone the same. Her team's performance improved by 40%. She didn't get a new personality, she got a data set. This is how you win clients. You stop relying on your gut and start treating your communication skills like a scientist treats an experiment. Tactical framework, the CRM for influence. You need to build your own log. You don't need fancy software, a notebook or a spreadsheet works. Call it your influence CRM. Create columns for stakeholder name, communication style, example, like stories, hate small talk, visual learner. Triggers, what makes them flinch, what makes them smile. Before you walk into a meeting with that person, check the CRM. Oh right, Sarah hates it when I start with a budget. She wants to see the creative vision first. This allows you to scale your empathy. You can't remember the preferences of 50 people, but your system can. AI makes you faster, not weaker. You can automate this.
After a Zoom call, paste the transcript into your AI tool. Prompt: analyze the other person's responses. Identify 3 moments where they seemed most engaged and enthusiastic. What topic was I discussing? What tone was I using? Let the AI build your CRM for you. The content engine: influence while you sleep. Finally, we have to talk about the ultimate scale: content. If you solve a problem for a client in a private meeting, you have influenced 1 person. If you write a LinkedIn post or record a podcast about how you solved that problem, you can influence 10,000 people. Most professionals hoard their knowledge. They think, if I give away my secrets, they won't hire me. The opposite is true. In a world of noise, the person who educates the market owns the market. The right ones influence many workflow. The trigger: every time you answer a difficult question for a client via email, stop. The extraction: that answer is an asset. Copy it. The polish: strip out the client's name, generalize the lesson. The distribution: post it as a LinkedIn update, send it as a newsletter to your prospects. Turn it into a 60-second video for social media. You are already doing the work of answering questions. You just aren't getting the leverage. When a prospect calls you and says, "I saw your video about supply chain bottlenecks and it's exactly what we are dealing with," the sale is already 50% done. You influence them while you were sleeping. You guide the conversation before you even know who they are.
Your next step. Here is your challenge for Chapter 10. Task 1, the video swap. Find one meeting on your calendar for next week that can be an email or a video. Cancel it. Record a Loom or use your phone. Send it. Measure the time saved. Task 2, the audit. Open a spreadsheet. Start your influence CRM. Put in the names of your top 5 stakeholders. Fill in one fact about their communication style. If you don't know it, make it your mission to find out in the next meeting. You have built the system. You have the mindset, chapters 1 through 3. You have the tactics, chapters 4 through 9. Now you have the scale, chapter 10. You are no longer just a person with a job title. You are a strategic operator. You are an influencer. But we have one final thing to discuss. We have covered a lot of ground. It is easy to get overwhelmed. It is easy to listen to an audiobook, feel inspired, and then go back to your old habits tomorrow. We need to seal this contract. We need a final challenge. Conclusion: the challenge to lead. We've covered the psychology, the tactics, and the tools, but understanding the theory of influence doesn't change your bank account or your career trajectory. Application does. Here's your challenge for the next 24 hours. Pick one high-value interaction. Before you enter it, define exactly what successful influence looks like for that specific moment. Don't wing it. Use the silence, frame the narrative, listen to the data. Apply just one framework from this audiobook. Strategic influence isn't a personality trait you're born with. It's a discipline you practice. The difference between someone who communicates and someone who influences isn't talent. It's intentionality. You now have the playbook. The next time you speak, make sure you aren't just making noise. Make sure you're making an impact. Now, go get to work.